I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother, was an inspiration, an example to me and to all my family. And we owe her the most heartfelt debt any family could owe to their mother.
King Charles had opened thousands of official documents across his life without letting his face change. State papers, constitutional orders, letters from world leaders carrying the weight of decisions that shaped millions of lives. He had been trained since childhood to receive information with composure, to let nothing reach his expression before he had decided what he wanted his expression to say. He had done this successfully through everything, through his own marriage breakdown, through Diana's death, through the extraordinary pressure of the accession and the coronation. Through a cancer diagnosis he managed with the specific discipline of someone who had been preparing for difficulty his entire life. Thousands of documents, decades of training, a lifetime of learning to remain readable only when he chose to be. So when his private secretary placed the sealed envelope on his desk on a quiet Wednesday morning, and Charles broke down completely within 2 minutes of opening it, the secretary understood immediately, with complete certainty, this was not an ordinary document. The envelope had been prepared by Queen Elizabeth before her death at Balmoral in September 2022. It had been held in the protected royal archive at Windsor Castle under a single instruction written on the outer seal in Elizabeth's own handwriting. 4 words: for the reigning sovereign. Charles had been the reigning sovereign for nearly 2 years before the instruction was carried out. The delay had been deliberate. The archive secretary who held the sealed envelope had been left a second private instruction alongside the first one, a note in Elizabeth's hand specifying a condition, a particular moment within the family that needed to have occurred before the letter was delivered. The archive secretary had been watching for that moment across 22 months. 3 days before the Wednesday morning, when the envelope appeared on Charles's desk, the condition had been met. Charles read the letter once, set it down, covered his face with both hands, and remained that way for nearly 2 minutes, while his secretary stood near the door, in the particular stillness of someone who understood that what they were witnessing required them to be invisible. Then the king looked up. His eyes were red, his composure was entirely gone in the specific unguarded way it almost never went in the presence of staff, and he said 4 words to his secretary in a voice the secretary would later describe as the quietest and most certain voice they had ever heard from him. "Get William. Come now." What Queen Elizabeth had written in that letter about her great-granddaughter Princess Charlotte, what she had seen across years of private, careful observation that she had never discussed with anyone while she was alive, what she had decided needed to be preserved and communicated before she was no longer present to say it, and what the existence of that letter means for the future of the British monarchy and for the 11-year-old girl at the center of it. This is that story. Before we go any further, if you are new to Palace Drop, subscribe now and turn notifications on right now. We cover the royal family the way it actually happens. Every video on this channel goes deeper than the last. This story involves Queen Elizabeth, Princess Charlotte, and a letter that was kept sealed for nearly 2 years before it reached the people it was written for. Stay with us. Queen Elizabeth II reigned for 70 years. She was the longest-serving monarch in British history, and one of the most studied public figures of the 20th and 21st centuries. What is less publicly understood about Elizabeth is the specific method through which she maintained her extraordinary consistency across 7 decades of reign. She watched people, not casually, not in the general way that public figures develop awareness of those around them as an occupational necessity, with the specific sustained attention of someone who had learned early and thoroughly that institutions survive across generations, not because of their formal structures alone, but because of the character of the individuals who carry those structures forward. She had been watching members of her family across her entire reign with this specific quality of attention. She had watched Charles from childhood through his most difficult decades into the reign she eventually handed him. She had watched William grow from the 15-year-old she had watched walk behind his mother's coffin into the future king, taking shape across the years of his young adult life. She had watched Catherine arrive and establish herself through the specific quality of demonstrated consistent character that Elizabeth valued above almost any other quality in a person entering the royal family. And she had watched Charlotte. Princess Charlotte is 11 years old. She is the daughter of William and Catherine. She is the second child in the family behind her brother George in the line of succession. She is not the heir. She has not been raised to be the heir. She has been raised by parents who have been deliberate in their intention to give their children as normal a childhood as the circumstances of their lives allow. Charlotte did not know that her great-grandmother had been watching her specifically. She did not know that the observations Elizabeth had been making across years of family occasions, private ceremonies, and quiet moments when Charlotte believed no significant adult attention was focused on her had been carefully recorded. She did not know those observations had been gathered into a letter. She did not know the letter had been sealed in an envelope with a condition attached to its delivery. She did not know any of it. What she knew was that she was 11 years old, and that the great-grandmother she had loved had died when she was 7, and that the world had grieved in a way that had been visible even to a 7-year-old who was herself inside the grief. The rest of it was waiting in a sealed envelope in a Windsor archive, until the condition was met and the envelope appeared on her grandfather's desk on a Wednesday morning. Drop in the comments right now where you are watching from, country or city below. We want to know where the Palisedrip community is based around the world. And stay with us because the specific condition that triggered the delivery of Elizabeth's letter is the detail that changes everything about the timing of what you are about to hear. The condition that Elizabeth had attached to the delivery of her letter was not a dramatic constitutional event. It was not a specific occasion in the family's public life. It was not connected to any milestone in Charlotte's official royal development. It was something considerably smaller and considerably more personal than either of those things. Sources familiar with the content of Elizabeth's private note describing the condition explain it in terms that reflect her characteristic precision about the things she considered genuinely important. She had specified that the letter should be delivered when Charlotte reached the age at which she was beginning to ask the kind of questions about her place in the family and in the institution that children of her background begin asking as they move from childhood into early adolescence. Not the simple, curious questions of a young child, the more searching and more consequential questions of someone who was beginning to understand what the life she had been born into actually meant and actually required of her. The archive secretary had been watching Charlotte across family occasions and through the accounts of those who worked closely with the family. 3 days before the Wednesday morning when the envelope appeared on Charles's desk, the secretary had heard something specific reported through the household communication channel. Charlotte had asked one of her parents a question about what she was supposed to become. Not asked with anxiety or distress, asked with the specific, quiet seriousness of a child who was beginning to think about something real rather than something abstract. The secretary judged that the condition Elizabeth had described had been met. The envelope went to Charles's desk the following morning. Charles had not been told about the condition or the timing in advance. He had simply found the envelope on his desk with his secretary's note that it had arrived from the archive with the instruction that it was for the reigning sovereign. He had broken the seal and read it without any preparation for what it contained. 2 minutes into reading it, his composure had broken completely. Then he had told his secretary to get William. William arrived at Windsor within 2 hours of receiving his father's message. He had been told only that his presence was required immediately and that it concerned Charlotte. That combination had produced in William the specific controlled urgency that he brings to situations involving his children. He got in the car. He made the drive. He arrived. He found Charles in the smaller private sitting room rather than the formal study. That choice of room communicated something before either man spoke. The formal study was for institutional business. The private sitting room was for family conversations. This was going to be a family conversation. Charles handed William the letter without preamble. William read it standing up. He did not sit down. He did not ask questions while reading. He simply moved through the pages with the focused attention of someone receiving information they understand to be significant and that they need to absorb completely before responding to any part of it. Charles watched his son's face while he read. The expression William's face moved through while reading that letter was the most revealing thing Charles had seen on his son's face in years. Not grief, not shock, something more complex than either of those things. The expression of someone receiving information that confirms something they had always known on some level and that they are now encountering in documented formal terms for the very first time. The letter was written in Elizabeth's characteristic handwriting, precise, clear, with the quality of someone who chose every word deliberately and wrote it down with the intention that it would be understood exactly as written. She began by describing the occasion that had first drawn her specific attention to Charlotte. A private ceremony at St. George's Chapel at Windsor. A quiet family occasion of the kind that happen regularly within the royal family and that generate no public coverage. Charlotte had attended with her parents. She had not been given any formal role. She was simply there as a child accompanying her family to a family occasion. During the service, an elderly veteran had stumbled while moving toward the memorial book. His medals case had slipped from under his arm and landed on the floor with the sound that draws everyone's attention in a quiet ceremonial space. The aides nearest to the veteran had moved immediately to assist. The royal family present had maintained the composure that ceremonial occasions require. Charlotte had not maintained her composure in the institutional sense of the phrase. She had stepped out of the family formation without hesitation and crouched beside the veteran before any aide had reached him. She had gathered the medals case from the floor. She had handed it back to him with both hands. The specific gesture of care and respect with which you return something precious to someone. And she had said something to him quietly that nobody else present heard the exact words of, but that had the observable effect of making the veteran settle from the startled distress of the stumble into the composed dignity of someone who has been genuinely seen and genuinely reassured. Then she had returned to her place in the family formation. The entire sequence had taken perhaps 45 seconds. Elizabeth had watched every second of it. She wrote in the letter that she had watched Charlotte make that choice in the specific moment when the child had complete institutional permission to do nothing, when staying in formation would have been not only acceptable but expected, when the easier thing and the more conventional thing was to allow the aides to handle it and continue with the ceremony as though nothing had happened. Charlotte had not done the easier thing, not because she had been instructed to act differently. Not because she had calculated that doing something visible would be noticed and rewarded. Elizabeth wrote that she was certain of this because she had watched the child's face in the moment before she moved. The decision had been made before the face had time to compose itself for observation. It was a genuine, unperformed, instinctive response to seeing someone who needed something and having the capacity to provide it. Elizabeth wrote that in 30 years of watching young people move through royal occasions, she had seen that specific quality perhaps a handful of times. She wrote that every person she had seen it in had gone on to earn the deepest and most lasting form of public trust that royal life could generate. She wrote that she believed Charlotte would be one of those people. And then she wrote the paragraph that had broken Charles's composure and that kept William standing rather than sitting while he read it. She wrote that the monarchy was entering a period in which the gap between its formal constitutional authority and the genuine emotional trust of the public would be the most consequential challenge it had faced in a century, that the institution could navigate that gap through better communications and more carefully managed public appearances. But that navigating it successfully over the long term required something that communications and management could not manufacture. It required people of genuine character in positions of genuine visibility, people whose public engagement was not a performance of feeling, but an expression of it. People like the child she had watched crouch beside a stumbling veteran at a chapel ceremony on an ordinary family occasion when no camera was rolling and no recognition was possible. She wrote that she was writing this letter because she wanted the people responsible for Charlotte's upbringing to know what she had seen, so that they could protect it, so that they could nurture it without crushing it under the weight of expectation. And so that when the time came for Charlotte to decide what kind of royal life she wanted to live, the people around her would understand what was at stake in that decision and would give her the freedom to make it on her own terms. William finished reading. He folded the letter carefully along its original creases. He held it for a moment. Then he looked at his father. He asked one question. Did you know she was watching? Charles said he had not known, that the letter had been as much a revelation to him as it was to William, and that reading it had made him feel simultaneously proud of his granddaughter and inadequate as the person responsible for the institution Elizabeth had trusted with Charlotte's future. William nodded slowly. Then he sat down. The letter's existence created an immediate practical question that neither Charles nor William had anticipated when the private secretary first placed the envelope on the desk. What were they going to do with it? Queen Elizabeth's communications to the sovereign were technically institutional documents. They belonged in the royal archive. They were part of the permanent historical record of her reign, and this letter, if it entered that archive in the standard way, would eventually become accessible to researchers and historians in a way that would place Charlotte's future directly into the public domain, before she had been given the chance to make her own decisions about it. That was not what Elizabeth had intended. The letter made her intention explicit. It was addressed to the reigning sovereign. It was written as a private communication. Its purpose was to inform the people responsible for Charlotte's upbringing, not to create a public institutional declaration about her future role. Charles consulted the keeper of the royal archives, the senior official responsible for managing the permanent institutional records of the monarchy and for determining how sensitive documents are classified, stored, and accessed. The keeper's formal advice was that the letter qualified for classification as a private family communication rather than as an official sovereign document. That classification placed it outside the standard archive access protocols. It could be held under restricted family custody rather than institutional custody. Its future accessibility would be determined by the family rather than by the standard archive access timeline. Charles accepted the advice. The letter was reclassified. It was placed under the joint custody of William and Catherine's household and of the royal family's private family archive. It will not be accessible to researchers or historians until Charlotte herself decides otherwise. That decision was itself a reflection of the core request Elizabeth had made, that Charlotte's story be protected until Charlotte was old enough to determine its shape herself. Subscribe to Palace Drop right now and hit the bell. This is the level of detail we bring to every single video on this channel. Every week, every story. Subscribe now so you never miss what is coming next. William told Catherine about the letter that evening at home after the children were in bed. He told her the complete sequence, the sealed envelope appearing on Charles's desk, the archive secretary's account of the condition Elizabeth had attached to the delivery, what Charles had looked like when William arrived at Windsor, the content of the letter, the classification decision that had followed. Catherine listened without interrupting until he finished. Then she asked to read it. William had brought a copy from Windsor. He handed it to her. She read it in the specific way that people read things that carry significant emotional weight, not quickly, returning to certain sections and reading them again before moving forward. When she finished, she sat quietly for a long moment before saying anything. Then she told William that Elizabeth had seen what they had always hoped someone would eventually see, the quality in Charlotte that they had been trying to protect and nurture without naming it too loudly or making it too visible, or placing expectations around it that would change how Charlotte experienced it in herself. Elizabeth had seen it, had recognized it, had understood what it was and what it meant, and had cared enough to write it down and seal it in an envelope, and leave it for the people who needed to know it. William told her that Elizabeth had also written something about the responsibility that came with knowing it. Catherine said she understood what that meant. She told him the responsibility was the same one they had always had: to let Charlotte be a person before the institution made her a symbol, to give her the space to grow into whatever she genuinely was, without the weight of expectation pressing on every natural quality she expressed before she had the maturity to carry that weight. William said that was exactly what the letter asked for. Catherine said then they would do it. That was the end of the conversation. Charlotte does not know about the letter. William and Catherine have made a deliberate, considered decision together that she will be told when she is old enough to receive it, with the full understanding of what it means and the full agency to decide what she wants to do about it. Being told at 11 that your great-grandmother identified you as someone of exceptional character and future significance would be more likely to create pressure that distorted how Charlotte experienced her own natural qualities than to create confidence in those qualities. The value of what Elizabeth had seen in Charlotte at that chapel ceremony was precisely that it was unperformed, instinctive, genuine in the specific way that only actions taken without any awareness of being observed can be genuine. Telling Charlotte about the letter now would change how she understood every natural impulse she had going forward. Every instinct to step forward and help someone, every moment of genuine connection with a person she was meeting in an official context. The quality that Elizabeth recognized and valued would become self-conscious in a way that would change its character entirely. William and Catherine want to protect the naturalness of what Elizabeth saw for as long as they can. What Charlotte does know is that her grandmother Diana and her great-grandmother Elizabeth are spoken about in her home with the specific warmth and specificity that comes from parents who are determined their children know these women as people rather than as institutional figures. She knows that qualities like kindness and genuine attention to people and the willingness to act from feeling rather than from calculation are qualities her parents hold in the highest regard. She knows this without knowing why Elizabeth wrote it down. Sources familiar with Charlotte as a public figure across her recent appearances describe a child who carries herself with a quality that is consistently noted by people who observe her at official occasions, a quality of genuine presence, of being actually in the situation she is in, rather than performing being in it, of noticing the people around her rather than moving through them. It is the quality Elizabeth described in the letter. It is the quality Diana had. And it is the quality that the British monarchy will need more than almost anything else in the generation that is coming. What Queen Elizabeth's letter reveals about the future of the British monarchy is worth sitting with carefully because it goes beyond one child and one family observation. The monarchy in 2026 operates in a media environment that is categorically different from anything it has navigated in its history. The public's capacity to observe, evaluate, and form strong opinions about individual royals in real time has created a gap between the monarchy's formal constitutional authority and the public's genuine emotional trust of it that is more visible and more consequential than it has ever been. Elizabeth understood this. Her letter was written by someone who had spent 70 years watching that gap open and narrow, and open again through multiple crises, and who had reached specific conclusions about what would be required to close it in the generation after hers. Not better communications, not more sophisticated understanding of how public sentiment operates, not institutional reform or constitutional adjustment. Character, genuine observable human character in the people who would carry the crown forward, the kind that cannot be manufactured or managed into existence. The kind that only shows up in the moments that are not managed. In the 45 seconds when a child at a chapel ceremony has complete institutional permission to do nothing and chooses to do something instead. Elizabeth had spent 70 years learning to recognize that quality in the moments it appeared. She had watched it appear in Charlotte, and she had trusted the people responsible for Charlotte's future to understand what she had seen and to protect it until the girl was old enough to determine its shape herself. That trust is now resting with William and Catherine, and the people familiar with how they are carrying it describe two parents who are deeply aware of both dimensions of what it requires. The protective dimension. Do not crush what Elizabeth saw under the weight of expectation before Charlotte has the maturity to carry it consciously. And the liberating dimension. When the time comes, ensure that Charlotte receives the letter as information about herself that she is free to do with as she chooses. Not as a mandate, not as an institutional expectation, as a grandmother's honest observation about a granddaughter she loved and believed in. Elizabeth did not leave Charlotte a throne, or a title, or a constitutional position. She left her something rarer and more durable than any of those things. Her honest opinion, written down, sealed, preserved, and delivered at the moment it was most likely to be received, with the understanding it deserved. Queen Elizabeth II spent 70 years watching the British monarchy survive things that should have destroyed it. In the final years of her life, she wrote one letter to one future king about one child. Not about titles, not about succession, not about constitutional frameworks or institutional reform. About a 45-second moment at a chapel ceremony. About a child crouching on the floor beside a stumbling veteran. About what that moment revealed about who that child genuinely was underneath every layer of expectation and circumstance and public observation. Charles read it and broke down. William read it standing up and could not speak for a moment after he finished. Catherine read it and said Elizabeth had seen what they had always hoped someone would see. Charlotte does not know about it yet, but somewhere in a protected archive in Windsor Castle, under restricted family custody, sits a document in Queen Elizabeth's own handwriting that says something about an 11-year-old girl that no title, no ceremony, and no institutional appointment could say more powerfully or more permanently. That she was seen, that she was recognized, that the most experienced royal of the modern era looked at her in an unguarded moment at a quiet family ceremony and believed she had what the institution would need most in the years to come. Whatever Charlotte chooses to do with that, when she is old enough to choose, she will do it knowing that Queen Elizabeth trusted her with something more valuable than a position or a platform. Her honest and considered opinion, and that is not nothing. That is everything. Subscribe to Palace Drop and hit the bell. Every week we go deeper on the stories the palace does not want mapped. The palace has a version of every story. This is the other one. The story does not end here. It never ends here, because inside that palace there are always more doors, more documents, more decisions being made in rooms the public never sees. Palace Drop will be at every one of them. Subscribe now and make sure you are here when the next door opens.